Electricity power in a developing economy like Nigeria is not only one of the most important utilities, but a critical catalyst to rapid development. In Nigeria, adequate supply of electricity has eluded successive governments, and the sector has gone for years without resolving the challenge of unsteady power supply. This has translated into a very slow development of the sector, incessant outages, and obsolete electrical infrastructure. This has negatively affected every aspect of the power value chain, from generation to transmission and distribution. At the advent of the Muhammadu Buhari administration in 2015, the Ministry of Power, Works and Housing was given a clear mandate to ensure the improvement of power supply in Nigeria. The Honorable Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Mr. Babatunde Fashola SAN, and his Ministers of State, Mustafa Babashehuri, and the Surveyor Usman Hassan Zama, and their team of engineers in the ministry set out to study the situation and went on a nationwide inspection tour of electrical installations to get a clear picture of the situation in the power sector. This exercise helped in no small measure to come up with a plan of action which includes policy formulation for rapid growth of the sector.
Well, where we are at is that we have moved things forward from where we met them. If you look at the numbers on the value chain, generation has gone up from 4,000 megawatt to 7,000 megawatt. Transmission has increased from 5,000 megawatt to over 7,000 megawatt transmission capacity. And distribution has gone up from 2,690 in May 2015 to averagely 5,000 megawatt today. And there are many more power projects coming on to increase generation. No less than 90 transmission projects coming up before the end of the year, which will be completed and connected to the transmission grid system. And there are no less than 100 transmission and distribution projects also that will come on stream this year through the NDPHC for distribution and TCM for transmission.
Several implementing agencies carry out various responsibilities, as this documentary will show. One of such agencies is the Niger Delta Power Holding Company, NDPHC. There are the legal vehicle that holds the National Integrated Power Project NIPS assets using private sector-oriented best business practices. NIPS was established by the federal government in 2004 as a fast-track government-funded initiative to stabilize Nigeria's electricity supply system.
We started off with generation plants. We have 10 power plants altogether. 8 of them are on the grid, presently on the grid, 2 are under construction. We have done several transmission projects, we've done several distribution projects. All the power plants have their gas delivery infrastructure also done. In terms of delivery of the infrastructure, we're about the only integrated entity in the country today since PSCI was unbundled and privatized. So yes, that's what NDPHC has done as an implementing company for the National Integrated Power Project.
The Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN, is the only arm of the power value chain that is fully run by government. They are responsible for ensuring a steady increase of transmission capacity in the sector, enough to build redundancy.
In the power economics, when you have a generation of 7,000, TCN capacity is supposed to be 14,000. It's supposed to be twice. Because we are supposed to transmit with what we call redundancy. And what is redundancy? If you have a need for 60 MVA, we are supposed to have 60 times 2. If we have a need for a line that is supposed to carry 1,000 megawatt, we are supposed to have 1,000 times 2 or build it in loop so that if one side have problem, you can backfit through the other. So that is why we are working hard to put the N-1 through the transmission rehabilitation and expansion program that we have.
With an estimated population of over 180 million people and a population growth rate of 2.43% annually, the power needs of Nigeria keeps growing year on year, which means the sector's infrastructure requires yearly upgrade to meet up with the population needs and increase the demand for power. In this regard, the Muhammadu Buhari administration has shown commitment, enabling the Ministry of Power, Works and Housing to carry out several upgrades of power installations all over the country.
When we talk about either insufficient distribution capacity or we talk about transmission deficits, or we even talk about generation deficits, really we must continue to do this in context. And the context is that our population hasn't slowed down. It continues to increase. So it means that our infrastructure must race first to catch up and then build a redundancy that allows for there to be a sufficiency. So it's important that we increase capacity of investments. And that is what I spoke to earlier about more distribution projects, more transmission projects, trying to bridge the gap. On Monday, the 9th of March, we were at Uma here, for example, to expand the distribution, the transmission capacity in Umaya substation. That substation, I think, was built in 2012. The population around that area has grown significantly. Areas like Bendel, Hafia, Arochukwu, and so on and so forth. So we've added a 40 MVA transformer to the existing 80 MVA to increase capacity to 120. We have done the same thing at our Bar substation to supply places like Osisioma, Ngwa East and West, and so on and so forth. Again, the Aba substation was built, I think, in 1958. Its existing capacity was 127.5 MVA. We've added a 60 MVA transformer to expand to 180, and this is what we are doing across country. So it's important that the infrastructure deficit must be related to the growing population.
There has been significant increase in power generation from 2015 till date. However, distribution of power still poses a challenge in Nigeria. The Honorable Minister for Power, Works and Housing, Mr. Babatunde Fashola SAN, explains how his ministry is addressing this challenge.
We've made it very clear what we want to do. Instead of speaking in megawatts, promising X, Y megawatts as has been the case, we decided to change the approach to do very simple things. You don't have enough power in your home, what do? You either buy more power or you contract more power. So let's just get incremental power. And so all of the things I've spoken about address the entire value chain in terms of incremental power, add a capacitor bank here, add a transformer here, expand the line there, increase the capacity of generation, increase the capacity of transmission, and so on and so forth. So we're very, very methodical about what we're doing. What is interesting now is that everybody in the value chain, whether the private sector operators or indeed those of us on the policy side of government, have all hooked up to a very common and simple message. This is what we need to do.
With increased activities in the power sector and visible positive changes recorded through the Power Sector Reform Program, it is expected that Nigerians will want these improvements sustained to ensure more stable power supply in the country.
Well, the Power Sector Reform Program, the PSRP, is simply our catchword phrase for addressing all of the problems in the power sector, from generation to transmission to distribution, all of the problems that exist there. So it also addresses issue of customer service, meter supply. It addresses issues of liquidity. Do the GENCOs get paid? Do the gas companies get paid? Are the DISCOs collecting enough? Are the customers happy with estimated billing? No, they are not. What should we do? So the Power Sector Recovery Program, you take time to read it, articulates all of the problems that we have come across and puts it in one single document and identifies who is responsible for what, and then prescribes what that person needs to do, so that if everybody does their part, we can solve the problems along.
Power infrastructure the world over is very expensive. For a developing economy like Nigeria, this could be a huge burden on the government. Innovative means of raising funding for this utility is vital to the provision of adequate power supply. Though Nigeria, to an extent, has enjoyed the patronage of institutions like the World Bank in this regard, the need for private sector investment in some aspects is another means of funding.
I think it's important also to situate the intervention of the World Bank. The World Bank cannot fund all of Nigeria's power needs, even if they wish to. So it's a basket of funds and commitments from many quarters. Some of them, what the World Bank, of course, brings on is their endorsement of our reforms, their acknowledgement that there is a new momentum, because many of the investors also, through the private sector arm of the World Bank, require funding. They require guarantees, and so on and so forth. So if the World Bank is saying these people are doing the right thing, it elicits more private sector funding enthusiasm.
For better information flow amongst players in the sector before the chairman and commissioners of NERC were appointed, the Honorable Minister, Power Works and Housing, had the monthly power sector operators meeting across the country to enable him see the power assets and also bring regulators and operators together to solve problems of the sector more rapidly. There were 29 editions of this meeting before it was handed over to NERC. The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, ensures there is balance in service delivery to customers, and the players in the sector play by the rules.
We were formed by the Act of the National Assembly in 2005 with the enactment of electric power sector reform, which unbundles the power sector into generation, transmission, distribution, and of course the customer end of things. So the entire supply chain, the value chain of delivering of power is under the Commission for its assignment, or at least authority to not only regulate but to enforce rules, and to enforce rules to guarantee processes that are put in place are enforced, and to assure that at least all standards or quality of service, reliability of service, affordability, that means cost implication, is maintained between the customer and our licensee. So we give license, we take care of customers, we worry about complaints of customers, and of course we make sure the appropriate cost is applied in terms of payment for kilowatt of power in every home industry in Nigeria. It is our job, just like you know, in the entire supply chain, we have to worry about what the GENCOs do, we have to worry about the transmission services to be sure they provide, they evacuate power to the customers through distribution companies. Like I said, we have to maintain standards, and that standard may involve keeping the voltage within limits, keeping the frequency, making sure the frequency they use to supply power is within limits. And overall, to make sure that at the end of the day, the customers are happy, and of course, the investors who invest in our business are also happy. So it's a win-win. That's our goal here.
NAPTIN is saddled with the responsibility of training new entrants into the sector and conduct research to improve service delivery to Nigerians.
Our trainings are offered for the generic utilities and stakeholders within the power value chain, but we do offer training to the public, especially the young Nigerians, new entrants into the power sector, who are graduates of electrical and mechanical engineering. We have a program that provides them with skills to be able to build a career within the power sector. It's more or less like a program, that bridge the gap between academic knowledge, academic qualification, and what is required, to really go to the network to practice as engineers. We have it at the low end as well for the technicians. And what we do as well for the public is we do energy efficiency, audit, and energy management. This is a program that is available for the public to make it possible for them to optimally make use of their energy consumption and to manage it in such a way that it will reduce cost. We equally have programs for female Nigerians on solar PV installation, solar PV supervision, solar PV mini-grid and mini-grid design. These are critical mass programs aimed at providing jobs, building entrepreneurship within the Nigerian youth, and also providing gender representation in the power sector, because we really give room for women. As I'm talking to you, we have a program going on in partnership with IFC, where we're training 200 young Nigerians in our center in Lagos.
NEMCO manages the non-core assets of the power sector post-privatization.
The non-core assets were transferred to us through a transfer instrument by the Bureau of Public Enterprises, BPE. So what we try to do is to ensure that those assets are properly put together. We've done an inventory of those assets in the entire country. We also try as much as possible to manage their existence. As we speak now, the Honorable Minister of Power Works and Housing and also the National Council on Privatization, chaired by His Excellency the Vice President, has given us the go-ahead to start the first phase of sale of those non-core assets. We've advertised them in about 4 national dailies for valuers, those that will value those assets and those that will act as sales agents. I must say that the response has been quite interesting. We have had over 220 submissions thus far of valuers and sales agents that have shown interest. So in terms of managing of the non-core assets, I think NEMCO is on board. And for the first time in the history of this country, we've been able to scale up issues concerning sale of national public assets.
One of the major responsibilities of NEMSA is testing meters to ensure standards. They ensure specifications are met and regulations are adhered to. They inspect and carry out certification of electrical materials and equipments.
We have our zonal offices, field offices, because the work is done on the field. So these zonal offices carry out inspection, testing, and certification. In the process, they discover all these type of substandard materials, because it's only when you go to test with equipment, it's not subjective, it's just visible. You use equipment to analyze and then fish out those materials that are substandard. And it may interest you to know that even when NEMSA was fighting for its act in the National Assembly, SON was an organization that stood stoutly to say this agency is needed in the power sector to do specific enforcement and specific certification within the power sector.
The Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company, NBET, is a wholly federal government-owned company, incorporated in 2010 as part of the roadmap for the power sector reform. They purchase electricity from the generating companies through the Power Purchase Agreement (PPA) and sell to the distribution companies through vesting contracts. They manage financial flows for physical supplies on the network. One of the biggest issues a power consumer in Nigeria faces is estimated billing. A good number of buildings do not have meters, and authorities estimate consumption for billing. This has created a scenario where most power consumers are desperate to have meters to stop the situation where they are charged for power they believe was not consumed. How is the Ministry of Power, Works and Housing going to solve this problem?
If you look at the period where we were fighting between June 12, 1993 and 1999, how much investment went to power? But many more children were being born then. So people born around that time are now 20-something. People who were teenagers around that time have started raising families and adding to the population. People who were tenants at that time have built houses. So when you look at that in the context, the metering deficit then hits you appropriately. So it's something we must tackle. What have we done? What we have done is, let us open up the market to a new set of people so that the DISCOs can use their resources to do their core business. Let us license them as meter asset providers in the way that you have licensed DISCOs, in the way that you have licensed TCN, and the way that you have licensed GENCO, so that a new set of players come into the market. And that's what we have done. We have now issued regulations that allow this to go on, but the meter asset provider must now work with the DISCO to say, I can provide you meters, you don't have to pay for them, put X naira into the bill, I have reached an agreement with these consumers, they are ready to work with me, and they will get a license from NERC, and they can roll out meters.
A good percentage of Nigerians live in rural areas. They too require electricity for their daily needs and businesses. The federal government, through the Rural Electrification Agency, strives to supply the rural areas with power, and this is achieved through some initiatives that may be peculiar to areas such interventions are needed. Government is encouraging the use of alternative means of generating power for rural consumption, and individuals are encouraged to invest in the mini-grid program to provide power for communities and institutions situated in rural areas.
The Rural Electrification Agency is the agency created by the Electric Power Sector Reform Act for the purpose of providing access to rural communities that have not been served largely through the grid. There should have been a strategic implementation plan 1 year after 2005 when the law was passed. That plan was not done until President Buhari came. We prepared it in the ministry, presented it to him, and he approved them. Now that plan to access rural communities and connect them to power was built on 3 anchors. One anchor was small hydropower plants, and we have announced the approval for concessioning of 6 of them across the country. It was built on using the uncompleted and in some cases abandoned rural electrification programs that started since 1999. There were about 2,000 of them as a second anchor. It was also built on using the universities as a third anchor.
Again, probably one of the most transformative programs we have as an administration in power, because it goes to the heart of the SME. So you're working with a Rara market with 37,000 shops, Sabongari with 13,000, Suram market, you know, all these different ecosystems. And what you're doing is providing them power that they need to run their businesses, to thrive, tailors, furniture makers, or just people who are just selling provisions. So that program was already kicked off. We're doing it currently now in 15 different markets across the country. But we've already identified the scale up of over 340 markets around the country, all private sector finance, all private sector implemented. And what we are doing as government is really creating that right enabling environment to allowing the entrepreneur to get into the markets, to get into the different environments so they can provide this service for the people at an affordable rate where the customer is king. So for an example, there's a meter in every single installation, every single shop. So reduce the issue of estimated meter or what is involved. You pay for what you utilize. And then I guess finally, the other program I was going to talk about is energizing education. Again, the federal government, the youth and the students are very dear to our heart. We made a commitment that we were going to make their lives easier and, them thriving in their educational capacity. So what we're doing is putting in independent power plants within the universities, either solar or gas-based, but about 90% of these are solar within the universities. Tied into that, we're also building them street lighting all around the campus for security.
In my residential environment, where I stay at Mushi, I would say that the light has improved in the past years, because I moved there about 4 years ago and the light was not this constant. But over time now, like let's say late last year till now, things have improved and now I have constant light. Well, let's say the new Ministry of Power, they've done a really, 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 really great job, and I'm really thankful to Babatunde Raji Fashola for his leadership skills and being able to provide electricity for one Nigeria, regardless of politics, regardless of class, regardless of religion. He has been able to connect Nigerians with light and power supply.
The Honorable Minister for Power, Works and Housing explains the effect of this program on the average Nigerian in terms of energy consumption and availability of power.
As we speak today, there are maintenance issues and faults along the gas pipeline network, but you won't feel the impact significantly unlike before. We're still keeping the power on because the energy has increased, so we can call in power from other places and redistribute power. As we're also expanding the transmission capacity, you may have seen in reports places like Kano and I think either Jos or Bauchi, where our substations got burnt. Because of extra capacity that we have put there, the whole place is not shut down. We can feed from alternative sources, and that will increase. So what I see on the horizon is very, very inspiring. It's an optimistic tomorrow, it's a better tomorrow, as today is clearly a better story than 2015.
The attention given the power sector by the Muhammadu Buhari administration and improved funding of the sector, the determined and methodical approach to executing power projects, the innovative ways employed by the Honorable Minister for Power, Works and Housing, Mr. Babatunde Fashola SAN, and his team in raising funding for the sector, and sheer hard work put into improving the sector has already started yielding positive results, as Nigerians have started experiencing better power supply nationwide. The dogged manner the policy on incremental power supply and other initiatives of the Ministry of Power, Works and Housing is being pursued leaves no one in doubt that finally Nigeria is getting it right in the power sector.